Hey, welcome to Stretch. I'm Phil.
I'm Phil.
It's good to see you today. I hope you guys have had a great Valentine's weekend. Do you have a good Valentine's weekend,
It
Phil?
was.
All
It was
right.
filled with love,
That's good.
and love was in the air.
Did you enjoy your President's Day, celebrating all of the presidents?
Yeah, it's always a time where I like to take and reflect and uh, pretend to read a book
Yeah.
about the presidents. No, I like President's Day because it's a good time to reflect on all the leaders that we've had in the past.
Like James K. Polk?
he was he was a character.
He was something.
I wasn't expecting you to lead with him. But that kind of caught me off guard. But he was a character.
He was. There was all the things he did. We would talk about him, but there's so many. It's hard to narrow it down just to one James K. Polk
No.
presidential thing. So, we're in the month of February, and we're talking about love and Valentine's and romance and relationships in the church. But it's also a time that, if you're in school and lots of places, we're talking about celebrating Black History Month, getting to know and understand how we work across racial boundaries and a lot of things we do. And in the church today, I mean, it's almost, one of those catchphrases that you hear a lot. Young people starting churches, as we're reaching out to churches, there's this huge push for multiculturalism inside of our church. The idea of reaching across racial lines to reach people. And in our Facebook question today is kind of referencing that. And it's asking, what are the benefits of having a multicultural ministry focus in our church today, and I know that you did some ministry in Philadelphia, and I know that it has to be multicultural while you're doing ministry there, and so I thought you'd have some good insight on how that might be a powerful tool for the church today, something we're pursuing.
Yeah, I think this is something that is talked about a lot these days, and what the benefits are is simply, I think when you really boil it down to, you're just reaching more people for Jesus Christ. How does that work out? So, multicultural churches, I think we were talking about this a little bit. People mean different things when they say that.
Right.
Typically, I think we refer to, race. When you think multicultural, you want people that look different sitting in the pews. You want people that are Caucasian, African American, Latino. And so, the benefits of that is if you have a multicultural ministry, you're reaching more people. Now, I think we're going to get into this a little bit. Philadelphia is very much a diverse city.
Right.
I think it's the 5th largest city in America right now. And there are so many cultures in Philadelphia. It's crazy. Philadelphia has their own Chinatown. Philadelphia has, a historic black district. Then you have, your suburbanites all around Philadelphia. So there's different cultures. And the benefit of having a multicultural ministry is that even in a neighborhood of Philadelphia, I was doing ministry in it was called Wissanoming. It was a neighborhood. So right. Philadelphia, I'm going to rant here. Philadelphia is the city of neighborhoods. And so it's funny that each neighborhood has its own culture. And I was living in an apartment that was in the Irish neighborhood.
Right.
And so that was called Mayfield.
Okay.
But the church was in Wissanoming, and Wissanoming was very much Spanish and African American. And so I'm obviously Caucasian.
Yes.
And so
we have a problem with the white balance. The two of us are so white sometimes. But
yeah, we're so white that the lights beam off of us.
And we do want to know, we are consciously aware on a day that we're talking about multiculturalism, it is two white guys. And
one from Texas and one from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so we understand where we're coming from, but work with us here.
Yeah.
It's part of the dialogue.
But multicultural church, in the sense then, is that, okay, well, the first thing you think of is obviously I'm Caucasian. How do I minister and how do I connect to somebody who speaks Spanish,
right,
who's Latino? It's funny because we actually had, the church was on a street called Devereux, and the very next house was a lady from Somalia who was a Somalian refugee.
Nice.
And hardly spoke a lick of English. And so, when we think of multicultural and the benefits of it is, well, how would the church love on her? How would the church, help her and where she was at? It was a rough time. Somalia is not the most stable country in the world compared to, Western democracy. but it's like multicultural churches are something that help reach more people for the gospel, and I think that's what I'm really getting at, is that we need to be training leaders. I think we can flesh that out a little bit, but we need to be training people to reach different cultures that I might not be able to relate to as well.
Yeah. Well, it used to be said that the most segregated time in America was 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings.
11 o'clock on Sunday.
That while in so many other places, I grew up as a military brat, so my dad was in the military, and so in the military it's all about rank. You know, what rank, what symbol is on your shoulders, and it determines who you salute and who salutes you, and it's all about the rank. And so really as a child I didn't really grow up with this tension of races, because I kind of lived in this meritocracy that we respected. You know, we respected everybody, but it went up and down the list based off of the merit on who you were. And so that's kind of how I grew up, and didn't always see kind of the negative side of race relationships as a kid. Then when my dad got out of the military, and then when I started pastoring in churches, realized that actually was still a tension, something that I thought wasn't around. But we had a couple that was interracial that was dating back in the 80s, and you'd have thought that was the biggest scandal in the entire world, that was going to be going on in the church. You know, we need to do something about it, and you know, the times have changed, you know, thankfully, that we're not dealing with that. But that's in my lifetime, where literally deacons were having a meeting about, should we kick these people out of a church because they're having a multi-ethnic relationship. And so the church has, as much as we like to say we love Jesus, we love God, we follow the Bible, I think the church has had kind of a sketchy relationship with multi-ethnic ministries throughout the path. And I think maybe we deserve some of the criticism that comes on the church in some places. Not every church, but there has been a systemic history of the church being less than sensitive to those circumstances.
Yeah, and when you think of those dark histories, and I mean, you have to confront it head on. I think that's something that we shouldn't hide from, and just acknowledge that was sin. Even our own denomination. I mean, at the Southern Baptist Convention, obviously, this is a part of the history that we don't want to mention it too often, but yeah, the Southern Baptist was born out of slavery. It was that split, you know.
I would contend it's not born out of slavery. It was born out of the Civil War, and the churches couldn't work. And every church split. The Methodist Church, the Episcopalians, every church split. It's just the rest got back together. Right. and we didn't. We didn't. But yes, it was in that tension.
That tension, you confront that head on nowadays, though, and acknowledging, hey, we were wrong, you know. Like, it's a different time. Yeah. We were not living godly in those times, and it's just something that, you know, unfortunately it happened. Yep. And you have to acknowledge it. Yep. You can't hide from it. And so, like your example of the inner race relation, you know, it's unfortunate that happened, but you just confront it today and say, hey, that was wrong. What you were doing was fine. Yeah. And we were not, you know, representing Christ properly.
And here's the ironic thing, you know, once again, going back to my Southern Baptist history, when we're going through seminary, when I was in seminary back in the late 90s, we were still boasting that the Southern Baptist Convention was really the only mainline, the only Protestant denomination that was still seeing growth and still getting bigger, whereas most of them were in a series of decline. And while that was technically true at the time, and it's not true today, all denominations are shrinking today. It was technically true at the time, but if you looked at the statistics, it was only true because our international and our ethnic churches were so vibrant and growing so rapidly that their growth was making up for the deficiencies in growth in the majority Caucasian white churches that were in the convention. And I think it was that lack of realization that while numbers wise there were a ton more of these white churches that were out there, growth wise, ministry wise, the ministry was being driven by our ethnic churches, and still very much today are being driven by our ethnic churches. That they're so much more passionate about the gospel. In some sense, we have bought into the consumerism idea of the gospel, where we pay a pastor and pastor go do it. But with a lot of these ethnic churches that don't have the resources, don't have a fancy building, don't have stuff, the only thing they have is the Holy Spirit, and they give it to everybody in their churches, and they say go out and change your community, and they are.
I mean, we definitely have a comfort here in America that's just we're just blessed. We've been blessed beyond anything in that. We have the liberties and freedoms and the culture that we have in the West here, and that we get to consume our church. We get to pick the type of church that we go to. Do they have a good, worship team? And yeah, I mean, you have churches in Africa that are, in sub-Saharan Africa that are just exploding with the gospel, and they could die for their beliefs at any second, and it's just we just don't have that here. And I mean, you think about the church in China, then going to the other side of the earth, that they live under a communist regime, and the church is more underground there, and it's just this multicultural churches in different countries are just, it's so different than what we think of here.
Right. So let's bring it back to us on a local level here, because like I said, every church, when you talk to their pastors, you talk to a church planner, somewhere in there they all will say something about, we really
diversity,
want to have a diverse congregation, and because most of our towns represent it. Now where we live actually is maybe not as diverse as some other communities in our particular one, but we're just south of Hartford, and Hartford is extremely diverse, and so whether it's ministry in our particular town or ministries we're connected to just a town over, there is a huge amount of diversity in the area that we live, and everybody preaches it, but so few truly reach that mark that they're looking for. And maybe, and once again, I'm springing this on you, but as you think about some of the places you've worked and some of the things you've done, what are some of the tools and techniques that we might be able to give to people that are watching to help them to foster a greater connection with a community that's a different ethnicity than the majority of people? How do we begin to make inroads into another community?
Well, I think you just have to be friendly first. you need to be nice.
Don't be a jerk. Come on.
I think it starts there. Is practice what you preach and be nice. I think it's more of like a state of mind, in my opinion, of when you're approaching somebody that's different than you. You need to be listening more than you speaking, and you can't be looking at somebody else's way. If it's a different church or a different culture. I mean, Centerpoint has had an Ethiopian Bible study meet in our church, and
Sam one something. So
Sam,
I still can't do his last name.
Sam,
Sorry,
we can't
Sam.
pronounce your last name, but we love Sam. And they're speaking a different language. They're worshiping different than what I do, typically, or what I've known growing up, and it's really, I think it's a state of mind when you're approaching somebody that's different, is that my way isn't better than your way. Your way is just different. And so I think that's how we need to be approaching multi-ethnic, multicultural, is that's exactly what it is. It's different. It's multi. Your culture is different than my culture. That's what makes it multicultural.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that listening you were talking about, I think, is so valuable. Trying to understand a community we're working with. Currently, I live in an apartment complex that has a large Indian population, and I've known some people here and there. We've had ministry teams that have done some India stuff, but we've intentionally begun to reach out to members of the Indian community, some that are Christians, and saying, what do we need to do in order to develop a relationship? And and it's just that it's beginning with a relationship. I mean, everybody talks about how they, when you find somebody that's maybe borderline racist, that they're always griping about this ethnic group and this about this ethnic group, and I can almost guarantee you that they've never just sat down and developed a friendship with people like that.
Have you engaged in their culture?
Yeah.
Do you understand them, or are you just angry that they don't conform to you?
Yeah. James Langford, who is the senator from Oklahoma, I'm not going to say a good friend of mine, but I know him professionally. We spent time together way back before he was a senator. And so one of the things that he wrote, he wrote an article about it that he was very sincere about. And James is as white as he can be, redheaded and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, whoa.
He
What's
said,
wrong with redheads?
I don't
Hey,
know, it's a whole different thing. But
all right.
but his issue, his deal, what he said, what would help heal racial divisions in our communities if we had more people of different races with their feet under the same table. His deal was invite them over and have dinner with them. Find somebody, if it's your Indian neighbor in the apartment, if it's like you're saying, the Somalian lady that's next door. Where I came from in Oklahoma, we had a huge Hispanic population, and there's nothing better than sitting down with some of your Hispanic friends, and my wife would tell you, have them make you some tamales, and then we're going to make them some burgers, and you get to know their families, and all of a sudden you're like, these people are not that bad.
Yeah.
I love these people. They're great.
Yeah, and I mean, when I was in Philadelphia, I was actually under a pastor that was Ecuadorian.
All right.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's just like, invite them into your home, sharing a meal. Food is like really one of the main strategies of not just even a multicultural, like getting to know somebody, because food is very cultural.
They love to talk. Everybody loves to talk about their favorite food.
Everybody loves to talk about food, but inviting people into your home that are different than you, that really, you're dropping the border fence in a sense if you're inviting somebody into your home that's just completely different. But food is definitely, it's so funny that it always comes back to food.
Yeah.
But food is, you think of multiculturalism in the church, and you always talk about, events where like bring a dish of like your culture or something. Right. It was funny because in our church we actually did like a census, and we had 16 different cultures or people from different backgrounds, and so we would always have dinners of like bring your favorite food from your culture.
Yeah.
And that was really fun.
Yeah, I think when I think of multicultural ministry, and the sad thing is the best examples I can think of are actually led by some of our international pastors. It's sometimes hard to say, okay, I see this guy that's one of our traditional Caucasian pastors that's really knocking it apart. And there are some that are out there doing that. But I have a friend up in Massachusetts named Lierte Soares. He's a Brazilian pastor.
I was waiting for you to bring him out. I was waiting for Lierte to get mentioned here.
And I laugh about it because, everybody keeps talking about, hey, you're Portuguese church. And he's like, whoa. It's not a Portuguese church. It's not a Brazilian church. His church is just called Framingham Baptist Church. And he actually preaches in two churches, the one in Framingham and one up in Vermont. And you want to find a white state, go up to Vermont. It's not just the snow. But he preaches in these two churches. And his Framingham church, which is in downtown Framingham, which is in the Boston area, the big loop around Boston. And so it's kind of in that area, but a very diverse neighborhood that's there. And he is very specific to tell me that he is not doing a Brazilian church. Now, he does it bilingually. He preaches in both English and Portuguese at the same time. So one sentence, back and forth. But he'll tell you in his congregation, he has like 10 different countries that are represented, people that have come from different countries and have shown up there. And I'm more welcome there than anywhere else. You walk in the door and it's like, hey, Brother Phil, and all of a sudden you're on the stage, you're praying for something or you're doing something. And I spoke to his youth group once. He's like, hey, can you come speak to the youth group? I'm like, that's great. And there were 3 or 4 kids in there didn't speak any English, and so had friends and other people that were translating, and it's a beautiful picture, and the people around him, people in the church planting movement were like, hey, we need to plant some more Brazilian churches. He's like, I didn't come here
Yeah.
to plant Brazilian churches. I didn't come here to plant Portuguese churches. If I wanted a Brazilian church, I'd stayed in Brazil, is what he would tell me. He's like, I came here because I looked around at all of you white people, all the Caucasians, and realized how many of you were lost. And so his idea of a multicultural church is a Brazilian guy coming and incorporating a church that'll include Americans, traditional white Americans in his church, because he sees the lostness in our community. And that to me is a devastating thought. But at the same time, what he's doing is very impactful, because he is not looking at people based off of, what ethnicity you are or where you come from, but he genuinely is saying, where can I find the lost people and how can I reach out to them?
Yeah, and it's always been frustrating for me personally. It's like, oh, that's the white church. Oh, that's the historical black Baptist over there, African American Baptist, and oh, the Korean church. We have one in Weathersfield. We have the Korean, I think they're Catholic?
Yeah.
Korean Catholic? See, I need to get out there and I need to engage them. And it's just like, well, one thing that I always think about when it comes to multicultural ministry is that, hey, if you're planting a church, if you're doing ministry, I'm a firm believer that your church should reflect the community that you're in. And so, I think people always talk about, I wanted to bring this up and see if you had any thoughts on it. It's like people always say, like, hey, well, we want a multicultural church, we want a multicultural ministry. Hey, well, your town's 98% Caucasian.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like Weathersfield, I think, with some census statistics, is that I think Weathersfield, Connecticut here is 86% Caucasian,
Yeah.
or of some European descent. And so there's a lot of white people walking around. And so if we're doing ministry in our community, I think I'm a pretty firm believer that the church should reflect the community that they're ministering in. And I think sometimes that people tend to force it. The church should reflect the community. And it's just like, well, we want to be multicultural. We want to be multicultural. Yeah. Well, you don't have the diversity in your community. Did you?
Yeah, no, and I've seen that to the detriment of some churches. Not in a racial thing, but yeah. I spoke at a church once and was there several times. They were between pastors. But the driving force in this church was so intent on reaching the homeless population. And so they're like, we need to be helping with the homeless population. Unfortunately, they lived in one of the wealthiest suburbs of the Boston area. Like, the houses around the church were all houses that would sell for over $1 million. There wasn't a homeless population. There wasn't an impoverished. I mean, you could do a clothes closet all you want to, but you're surrounded by millionaires. and it kept the church from reaching out to the doctors and lawyers in that area. And you need to reach out to doctors and lawyers. Many of them are lost and need to be saved, and many of them have valuable tools that would be useful in the kingdom of God for outreach. When you think about Doctors Without Borders and others that are Christian ministry operations that are out there, it's such a valuable thing. But for that church to say, we're not going to reach out to the wealthy people of our community when we own a building and we own land in this town. Instead, we're going to drive 30 miles away to go work in a homeless shelter. They were missing their mark. Now, should we work with multicultural? And Phil's right. Here in Weathersfield, the town itself is an old town, and so a lot of old families that have been established here. But we do border, like I said, Hartford, and you could cross the line at Hartford. So the bank that was connected to my bank in Oklahoma was in South Hartford, and so you would cross the border and you'd instantly know, okay, well, I entered Hartford at this point in time, and we were that close. And for a while, Centerpoint did some outreach in that area, and so it's vital. We may not be able to have every family travel where we are, but we could certainly partner in ministry with other churches and build that necessary relationship in the community that way.
Yeah, well, I would say our sphere of ministry does encompass the south end of Hartford. So whatever ethnic groups are there, those are the ones that we need to be reaching. And yeah.
So I have our verse of the day. So I'm going to pull our verse out. All right, and it's out of the book of Revelation. So it's the book of Revelation. It's the future. All right, so That was maybe more dramatic than it
I
should
was
have been.
like,
But
we needed some music there.
that's right. Post production, add it in, John. Okay. He doesn't know what that means. All right, but Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, it says, "After this, I looked, and there was a vast multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language, which no one could number, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, and they were clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who is seated on the throne, and to the Lamb.'" And so here in Revelation, John is getting his vision
It's a great
of
picture.
heaven, and his image when he is looking at the throne is the image of people from every land and every nation, every tongue is praising God together. And I guess what I had always been taught, even as a young kid, if we're going to be spending all eternity with people from every land and every nation, shouldn't we start now? I mean, doesn't eternity start the moment that we accept Christ, the moment that we are born again and we are now new people? We're no longer part of this world, but we're
Right.
part of a heavenly world. So shouldn't we start now building those relationships with our godly brothers and sisters we're going to spend all eternity with?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus and the salvation that's found in belief in Him. It's just something that's so. It transcends everything. It transcends race. It transcends, culture. Even though, like, we have different culture. We're both white and we have different cultures. You're a Texan. You're weird.
Awesome, independent, rugged, manly. See my cowboy boots?
Don't hurt yourself.
We do in Texas. We heard her. He's
No,
getting
but-
it. He's getting it. And he's from Pennsylvania, but not the cool part where Will Smith's from.
Yeah, but yeah, we should start now. We should start now with our, we have our commonality in Jesus Christ, and maybe we can get some more people in our vlog here, eventually, and yeah, that it's a beautiful picture that's laid out for us in the book of Revelations of every tribe, every tongue, language, every people that look different, and what are they all doing? They're all worshiping Jesus, and so. That's what it's unfortunate that we're limited right now and that we can't do that together. But it doesn't mean that we can't start.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be throwing up obstacles to make it harder
Right.
to do that. So, just kind of in the last few seconds, just kind of remind people, if we want to be the sort of church that's a multicultural church, one of the things I want to encourage you and want to encourage us is we have to reflect that not just in what we want in the church, but we reflect that in our leadership, and the people that are there. And so cultivating, building those relationships with Christian brothers and sisters that are of a different race than we are, but being a part of that mentoring process, leading and growing, so that eventually we could say, this is a leader in our church, this is an elder, this is this is going to be one of our deacons, this is going to be somebody on our worship team, this is going to be somebody that represents the church publicly as the face of the church, as a part of the face of the church, that's a powerful thing to be able to say, me, big, powerful pastor, I'm willing to give up a part of the leadership of the church to somebody that represents a different culture. It goes a long way in helping somebody from another culture say, well, maybe that's a place that I could worship at.
Yeah.
So I love having these conversations with you guys. 30 minutes sometimes goes faster than others, but I'm so glad that you were here with us. If you have some ideas, put them in the comments down below. Comment on our Facebook page. Talk about ways that we can build some greater multicultural ministries in the future and going on. Want to encourage you to subscribe to our page. So make sure down below you click the subscribe button. My wife tried the other day on her phone and she's like, it's not letting me do it because she wasn't logged into YouTube. So you may have to create a YouTube account. It takes less than a minute to create it just with your email, and then you can click the bell button. It now has options. You want to click the bell button for all, and then anytime that Centerpoint 840 puts something on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. It really only happens right now about 3 times a week. You'll get the sermon on Monday, you'll get this on Thursday, and you'll do a Bible study on Friday, and you'll be able to see that information. It'll be there ready to go. And so we want to encourage you to do those things, because the more you support what we're doing, the more we'll be able to bring you even more and better content.
We can talk about more things.
We'll talk about a lot more things, and maybe get a pedestal for the dog so she can be up here next to us and be a part of the conversation. All right. Well, God bless you all, and we will see you guys again next week.